Hello and welcome back to the Sussex Smuggler. I'm Captain James Bollinger, and today we've got a book review for you today. And the very book in question that I bought for an absolute bargain at the Works bookshop they're in most high streets, to say the least, aren't they? Is this book by Tracy Borman? Bear with me. It should be in your picture now. Witches by Tracy Borman. It's an excellent book. It captured my curiosity when I saw the cover because I've never actually really studied anything at that time in our history around the 16th and 17th century to do with witchcraft. I've obviously heard of um, the witch finders, the witch trials. It's where the saying comes from, doesn't it? Witch finding, a witch hunt, a witch trial, witch this, a witch that, and you get an idea of the stereotypical witch and how it come about, how it's come about. And this book addresses all of that. It's a complete analysis of witches, which were mainly women and some men that were known as wizards or warlocks, with an overall overlay of cunning folk. And the book starts off with defining different types of witches and sorcerers and cunning folk and their role in society ever since probably the ancient times, especially in rural villages and towns around Europe, and how they played a role in providing medical care and providing food and predictions, counselling services, representation, all sorts of kind of stop and fill the gap kind of things where there was no other service at the time. And the book goes on to describe how James the First, then who was the King of Scotland, came to England and became the King of England and unified the country, and how he persecuted uh, the witches and the cunning folk across England. And it's all a big build up to what happened to the Flower girls in their involvement at Belvoir Castle, um, in the north of the country. And the Earl of Rutland and his sons that died. But it's a big build up. It gives you some very interesting statistics, and one of them I found very interesting, that there was thought to be 100,000 witches, mostly women, that died between 1450 and 1750 simply for being labelled as a witch or using witchcraft. And what King James the First did, he actually wrote a book called Demonology, and that gave his written opinion on witches and how they should be dealt with in terms of a court of law. And Parliament passed various acts of legislative acts that departed from traditional um, uh, processes and procedures in law. And what it did, it made no, you couldn't have a defence for being a witch. And if you were labelled a witch by anybody, then that was it. That was your lot. You were actually guilty before you were even tried, and you had to go to court unrepresented and plead and prove your innocence. But in the meantime, you had to endure interrogation and torture whilst a confession was drawn from you. So this is what King James the First advocated, despite the fact that the king himself, you could interpret, practice witchcraft himself. I mean, it's mentioned in the book that he went hunting in Eltham Park, and he hunted a deer down and cut its guts open and stood in its belly to cure his ailments. And there's further evidence that he could be interpreted as being a witch by using physicians, and the physicians at the time would use what could be interpreted as the same witchcraft as the witches, and astrology on top of that. And these were very famous physicians that distanced themselves from witches and cunning folk, but were using very similar methods. And the book makes this point. And to any reader, I think it's probably obvious that there's a hypocrisy here. And it goes on to deal with King James I's sexuality, and that quite possibly that he may have been bisexual or even gay, and that he had favourite dukes and earls, and that he was actually in love with the Duke of Buckingham, and he loved him back, but also that he had to live with the Duke of Buckingham being a total womanizer. And you kind of get an underlying current from the book that James I actually despises women as it progresses. But I saw the book, as I said earlier, in the Works bookshop for £2, and I found it quite intriguing because I'd never actually borne out the history of witches in this country, let alone Europe, and what the story is. And it goes on and it analyses everything. It's brilliantly written by the author Tracy Borman, so gets my recommendation certainly. It's a great read. It's hard to put down, and I say it's a great analysis of witches and witchcraft and the persecution. And there were mostly women as well that they had to endure and go through. And it mentions at the end that the last cunning folk person was actually murdered in 1945, and the murder still stands to this day unsolved. So, yeah, brilliant book. Really enjoyed it. Um, so there you have it. That's my book review. Thanks for watching. Uh, if you do watch this in time, I'll see you at the Frost Fair at St Leonard's in Hastings. You take care, and I'll see you on the next video. I'm the Sussex. Oh, you're watching the Sussex Smuggler. I'm Captain James Bollinger. Take care of yourselves. See you again soon. Goodbye.